Okay, great. So good morning, one and all. Thank you for joining in. I'm seeing people already starting to make comments. And good morning to one and all. We will begin in next 1 minute. We already have our guest with us for today. Thank you. So good morning, one and all. It's 11:01. It's a beautiful morning here, sunny morning after about 4 or 5 days of heavy rains, and looking forward for an exciting session with our guest for today. For all of you who've joined, would be happy to share that Core HR IR as a platform which began about 4 years back with a handful of HR professionals and an intention that we want to look at doing networking, collaborating, and sharing a lot of learnings with HR professionals and give them an actual platform to express and share their opinions and interact is where Core HRIR began. And in 4 years' time, today we are more than 3,500 professionals across the globe with many different countries and many different people participating. We have various initiatives, where we do learning webinars. We have core connect sessions. We have core HR awards, HR shining awards that we do. And one of the additional feathers to our hat is candid conversations. So, Candid Conversations began about 3 months back, and the intention of Candid Conversation was to bring in a lot of business perspective to HR professionals. We hear a lot of good things from the experts in HR field and the best practices and the approaches that we need to take as HR. But there are business perspectives and expectations from business leaders for from HR, and hence this conversation series has been on with HR with business professionals on board. I'm happy to have Shrikant Vikaykar is okay. Am I able to run the PowerPoint here? Okay, great. So here is Shrikant Vikaykar. Team, so first of all, Shrikant, welcome aboard. Thank you for your time today for Candid Conversation.
Thank you, Kalpesh. My pleasure.
Great. So to introduce Shrikant, I would probably begin with, even before saying that he's the Director of Asia Operations, COPC. I'm so happy to share that he's one of my mentors, and a lot of contribution towards the way I think, or the way I consult, or the way I approach my clients today has a significant impact of what I've learned from Shrikant as a person. So Shrikant, thank you very much for that. So, team, to introduce Shrikant, Shrikant is the Director of Asia Operations, COPC. He's been a person who's a strong opponent of process improvement strategies and data-driven operations management. He's a Six Sigma trainer, and been a trainer for PMP and ITIL. He's also the thought leader in service operations management. And for anyone who is not been to his LinkedIn profile, I think it's a time to go through the articles that he's written across the process management strategies. He's one of the persons who's coined the term DFCX, which is designed for customer experience, and also a faculty at various business schools and institutions, including MDI, IMI, and SPJIMR. So, Shrikant, it's a pleasure to have you with us on board today.
Thank you, Krish. It's first of all, good morning to all of you. I probably have met some of you during the time, spent enough time in the industry, auditing, consulting, training people. So if some of you already met me, it's glad to see you guys again. But for those who haven't, I'm very glad to connect with all of you. And Kalpesh, thank you for those kind words. I really don't know how to react to some of those. So so thank you. And thank you for
Great.
having me here. Great opportunity to interact with all of you here.
Great, Shrikant. Thank you so much. So, directly to jump in, Shrikant, and talk about what we spoke about, that and I'm going to keep the screen on for some people, for them to relate to you and understand. And while we still see people joining in, we already have about 30 people who are live watching us, and
Okay.
we look at more people joining us. So Shrikant, I've always known you somebody who's very practical, and somebody who's mastered connecting the dots of various functions and various intelligence points or data that are available, or functions that are available. How do you see HR's role into an overall business unit or in business operations?
Sure. Let me first of all start off by congratulating all of you to kind of participate in this kind of a conversation. Because quite frankly, one of the things that we see, right, and as a trend that we see in the industry, I don't know, Alpesh, you must have already looked at it. We call it that you need to have an outside-in approach, right? And this is true for all businesses, right, and all functions, all departments. And for all organizations, the expectation is for them to look outside in. And what does outside mean? In mean is to. By the way, this is not a new term. This was coined about 10 years ago. But what is outside in typically would mean is that first look at what your customer is looking for, right? Look at what the customer is asking for, and then design your products and services accordingly. If we don't do that, then we may have a great product, right? We may have a great price point also, but if the customer doesn't want it, then there is no point in having that product and service, right? This is something that as organizations, as industries, we have learned over time, right? And there are examples, right? I mean, you were managing a banking process, right? And we know that banks have tried to attempt video chats for all these years. And we know that video chats don't work. Although it's a great technology, it's nice, it's cheap for banks, it's convenient, but the customers did not take the video chat
Yes,
because they didn't find any value in it, apart from having to go to the branch. Today, when we have lockdown and when we can't really go out, then video chat started to pick up, and now you see more and more people kind of getting into video chat, people being more comfortable. But till the time, right, even though we had a good product and service, because we did not think outside in, we had a product or service, but it did not sell, right? And there are several examples. I mean, I don't have to, I'm sure all of you who are on this particular section have experienced, right, products and services like that, which look technically beautiful, but people don't buy them, Now, why am I saying this is because bringing it back to your core HRIR initiative, right? A lot of times what happens is that internal functions also, right, kind of we get stuck to an inside out approach. We
Yeah.
keep looking at what we do, what processes we have, right, and what are we measuring and what activities we are doing. But unless we have an outside in approach, right, then your impact to the business becomes limited, right? And
Yeah.
one of the ways to do that is to ask the customers. And in our case, right, when it comes to HR as a function, since we are an internal functions, most of the times our customers would be the internal customers.
Yes.
And in most cases, these internal customers would be function heads, right? Service delivery, right? People like that who are actually running, operations and so on. And therefore, asking them in terms of what is it that you are looking for, I think is a great start, right? And therefore, I mean, to a certain extent, I would say that those of you who are participating in these sessions, I'm hoping that you are getting that feel when you speak with with business leaders, right? To a certain extent, from their point of view, right? What is it that they are looking at, right? From an expectation. Once we have that put in place, right, then the next question would be what is it that we are doing, right? And I'm going to, whenever we talk, right, I would like to kind of uh, play it in such a way that I would probably start to share with you my experiences in what is currently seen in the industry, right? And then we can probably discuss what we should expect, and then we can talk about how to get there, right? Where we are, where do we want to be, and then how do you get there, right? That's typically
Awesome.
the structure for any thought process, right? So typically, yeah, let me just quickly tell for those of you who joined in a bit late, right? So I am not an HR professional. I'm a consultant. I have been in this business now for almost 15, 20 years. We've been consulting organizations in getting their customer experience better. That's the sole business that COPC has, right? What we do, it's a single point focus that we have. And Kalpesh, you know that we have done that in multiple situations, multiple organizations. We've been blessed with really good and large clients and accounts that we work with globally. And what we do there is to help them improve their customer experience. Now, it's one thing to say that our customer experience should be better, but you all understand that it cannot happen by magic, right? It needs to have a discipline, it needs to have a design, it needs to have a deployment, right? Which is where you talk nicely about that DFCX. I tried to viral that hashtag some time ago. I think 2 years ago it started to get viral, then it obviously dropped down. But the DFCX, the logic behind that is to design for customer experience. So you want to make sure that the processes and the things that you have within your organization are designed in such a way that your customer experience becomes better. Now,
Yeah.
coming to your specific question, Kalpesh, right? If you look at customer experience, how do you get superior customer experience with any organization? Right? One is, of course, we have processes and all of that, but the most important one would be to make sure that the people that are there, that are handling the customers, right, and on the front end, mid end, back end, they have the skills and the knowledge and the desire to give exceptional customer experience, right? And in this time and date, when there is nothing else that you can really compete with, right? McKinsey says that 89% of the companies worldwide compete on customer experience. What do you what do you mean by 89? 89% means almost everybody, right? So everybody is currently competing on customer experience. If we are competing on customer experience, then how do we make sure that that happens? Is by making sure that the people that we have the right skills and knowledge to be able to do that. This is where, right, and I have been kind of advocating this across the industry, and I think a lot of us and a lot of our leaders within the industry understand that maybe 20 years ago people were still thinking that HR is a support function. It's no longer the case, right? 20 years ago we would say, oh, okay, service industry is a people industry and so on. The point is, all industries are people industry. There is no
Okay.
industry without people anyway, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
point is that the HR's role within the organization is absolutely critical. It is, To my mind, it is an old thinking to consider HR as a support function. Because if we are going to compete, and it can be any organization, I'm not, and I'll come to contact centers because we do work with a lot of contact centers. And in contact centers, we understand, of course, it's a people oriented business. But you take any other industry, you take retail, yeah, you take hospitals for that matter. What makes organizations better, right? What makes one retail store better than the other retail store? What makes H&M better than their competitors is when you go into H&M, and I'm sure over time that thing has gone down. But some of you must have visited the original, the initial H&Ms that they came up with, right, in India had such well educated groom and people, right, that when you go and ask, they would advise you, they would guide you, they would tell you exactly what you are looking for. Right now, how does that doesn't happen by magic, right? You have to put some people, you have to put processes, you have to put KPIs, you have to keep things in place, right? So that's what we are kind of wanting to talk about at this point of time, right? And some of the that is what where we are, where we want to be. How do you get there, right? There are a couple of things that we would probably see organizations doing. And as part of COPC, one of the things that we keep doing is that we keep looking for best practices. We are suckers for best practices. We keep doing best practices from all over the place. We put them in a standard, right? And some of you probably know COPC is a standard. You can download it. You can it's freely available. You just go on copc.com and you can download the standard, and you will find that a lot of those good practices we have tried to codify in that standard. Right. So one of the good practices that we normally suggest is to consider, right, the HR and the internal functions, consider operations and service delivery as a client, an internal client. And then you, just like with your clients, right? If you have SLAs and you have KPIs and you have targets and you have expectations around it. As HR, we have those kind of SLAs signed up with our own, own operations, own service delivery, own business units, right? So that would be, I mean, I know I went into a tangent, but hopefully, Kalpesh, that has given you a little bit of, and to the listeners, I'm hoping that you were able to get something around this. Okay, right. So that would be one of the things to talk about, is to kind of have operations and service delivery as your client first of all. So get into that outside in approach, identify what are they looking for, and maybe make a list of KPIs that are acceptable, agreeable, and then move towards it. Right now, this needs to be win. It doesn't have to be that we have to agree to everything that the client says, right? Which is true in any relationship, isn't it? All relationships need to be win-win. So if the operation says that you need to get me 50 people by next week, that's not going to happen. We know that, right? So we of course we have to live in a certain set of constraints. But as long as it's listed down, clearly articulated, written down, and I'm not saying that everything needs to be written down, but in some cases, just putting it on paper clarifies your position.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have a certain point of view, they have a certain point of view. So, one of the things that we always find in conflict resolution, the best way to do is to write your position down and their position down. Right? If you do that, to a certain extent, sometimes we realize that, I mean, the assumptions that we had were different. Right? You expected me to get 50 people next week, but actually, the assumption is that 50 people, even from some of them from internal, already deployed people. So, then maybe it's possible.
Yeah.
Right? So that would be one of the things that I would recommend, is that if you have not done, as HR managers, leaders, if you have not done, see if you can get into a situation where you get down and you say, okay, these are the things that I think you guys need. Does that make sense? Do you have anything else that you need to add? And then agree on a certain set of parameters, KPIs, and so on.
Beautiful. I think Shreekant, very well said. If I may, pick up the threads on what you just mentioned. The beauty is that, do we even as an HR function, think
Mm-hmm.
about our internal users more as customers or just as internal users. And I think what you rightly said, that a lot of times we end up feeling about that we are doers, we are executors, we
Right.
are, we are told and we are supposed to give. uh,
Right.
and if I share a live example, okay, one of the companies currently that I'm working with, Shreekant, and you actually
Mm,
picked up, the
mm,
HR was told to get 78 people on board in 2 weeks time in this COVID situation.
mm.
And
Wow.
the HR was having a firefighting situation, nightmares, and trying all that he can.
Mm,
And when I was talking to him, and I was like, so but did you reason it out, or what is the SLA that you have?
right.
And the answer was like, no sir, we are supposed to do because they are the business unit and they tell us, and we have to do it. Now, a very simple expectation there, that yes, okay, it's required for the business unit, but what's the SLA? Let's look at, what
Right.
the situation is, how do we find ways out? And having that
Right.
actual conversation, creates a win-win situation at both ends.
Right. 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 Right.
So I
And to a certain extent, right, the idea of me saying that you put it down on paper is not to make it binding. In fact, it is to
Yeah.
empower ourselves.
Yes.
Right. A lot of times, what happens is that, and you rightly, as you rightly pointed out, a lot of times, and I saw some of the questions that we had in the when people registered for this session. Right, and the question was, what do we do? How do we go about it? Especially when I'm a mid management or not very senior, then I don't really have position power, right? And in that case, what happens is sometimes just having this written down gives you that confidence that what I'm doing is right. I am also here to help, right? I'm here to support the organization. I'm not here to as a hindrance. But the point is that there are constraints that we need to work in, and in case those constraints are not being met, then we this is an exceptional situation. We will have to take care of that in that manner. But you cannot hold me responsible for something that is quite out of contrary, right? So that's
Yeah.
essentially what we have. Right? I can see Sanjeev's message there, right? It's talking about considering employees as consumers and not as users. And I used to work
Yes.
for a company called HCL. I'm sure all of you have heard about HCL, and you have also seen that they have a couple of books, and their leaders always talk about that employees first, customers second, which is kind of a little different from what people would normally talk about. The point is, you don't really have a choice, right? I mean, we are there in business because customers are there, right? But you want to also consider employees first, and we have several situations, especially now that we see that we are working in a world which is already so constrained, right? We have limited resources, where we find that we had this recent situation where a restaurateur stood up, right, for his employee, right, who was frustrated because the customers were complaining, and you need to be able to take a stand and kind of back your employee first, right? If the employee has done the right thing, right, then you don't want to bend backwards and do whatever the customer is asking, right? There
Yes.
are certain
Yes.
processes, there are certain approaches, there are certain things that need to be done. And I would probably bring that back into the HR function also and say that we have a certain things and we have a certain constraints. We are all here to kind of make this organization a success, whichever organization that you are working, right? And therefore, if we are able to keep the employees, as our first target, right, then that becomes helpful. It is even more important when it comes to an internal function like an HR, right? Because for you, we don't normally interact with end customers. What's our end customer? It is our employees. And therefore, right, having that first becomes rather important. And Kalpesh, you mentioned about some of my posts. I have written a small post there where people keep asking me, what can I do to get the employees really provide good customer experience? And I mean, different people have different, points around it. My view is generally if we focus on two things, right? Ownership and empowerment. If we are able to have these two things imbibed within our teams, within our employees, right? One is ownership and the second is empowerment. If we are able to do that, right, to a certain extent, the battle will be, more than half won. right? And I have given a couple of examples also that in the paper and the book, right? So I mean, in Starbucks, I went to a Starbucks, shop. I am a regular user, so I have a gold card, and this was in Terminal One in Delhi. I went to the shop. I asked the lady there. I said I need this thing. She said that the system is not working right now, so you will have to pay by other card. Now this gold card is a prepaid card, right? So it already has my credits and all of that. So like the nasty customer that I am, right? I got upset. I'm like, no, I don't want it. I'm leaving, right? And what was interesting is at that point of time, this lady called me back and said this exact words. She said that, sir, I cannot let you go out of this shop with that face. Tell me what coffee do you want? I will get it to you. You can pay me later.
Wow.
And the important part is all of us have come across some of these kind of examples, right? The important thing around here is that this girl didn't have to check it with anybody at that point of time. She had the empowerment to take that particular decision. She had the ownership to say that this is my shop and I cannot let this person go out with that kind of a face, right? So just if we keep on having that, right, as HR, as business leaders, if we keep wondering about how can I ensure that my team has empowerment and ownership, these two things, it's not easy, by the way, right? We all understand that, right? Saying this is one thing, right? But actually doing it, right, is completely different, right? And it doesn't have to be even money, right? Like for example, in this case, of course, they gave me a free coffee. I was very happy. I mean, it's been now 1.5 years to this incident. I'm still talking about this incident, right? So you can imagine the amount of goodwill that they are, Starbucks as such as generating. I am talking to now 50 people, about this one. I have, of course, being a good customer, I have gone back, I have paid them, but that is immaterial. The point is, even if I had not paid, right, there is a minor cost that this company had to get to just generate that much customer goodwill. But the point is that this was not done by the company; it was done by that individual.
Yeah.
Right, and it was done at that point of time because she had the ownership and the and empowerment.
Wonderful.
Right?
So,
I mean, just so that people don't have to worry about the fact that that it doesn't always cost money.
Yes.
Okay, I'll give another example. Right, I was in La Meridian, Bangalore. That hotel is no longer there, but I have a back pain, so I was walking. And it's a long corridor. So from my room, I'm walking, right, and it's a long corridor. I'm limping, right, and I'm coming towards the lobby. There is a housekeeping guy who comes in. He sees me walking, right? He comes to the lift lobby and presses the down button, smiles at me, and goes back. Goes to his doing his work. So what happens is by the time I reach the lobby, the lift is already there.
Wow.
Right? Now this is a really, really small example, but at that point of time, this boy, right, he looked at me, he owned that situation. He knew that, and it doesn't have to be me complaining or doing anything like that. He's just owning it is his hotel. So he sees a customer walking, he sees that the customer seems to be in pain, he's limping. So what would be a nice thing to do is to just press the button so that when the customer comes, he will get the elevator and he can go down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's an example, but the point is, how do we imbibe that in our employees? These are anecdotal examples, right? How do we make sure that this happens on a regular basis? For that, we need processes, we need matrices, we need ways to kind of measure it, analyze it, so on.
Wonderful, Shreekant. And Shreekant, for what you shared about the customer experience and the whole aspect of the Starbucks and the other examples you gave, and I've come across many such examples. When we used to train people, we used to take examples of Ritz-Carlton and the practices they have set in the hospitality industry.
Correct.
As an HR, I'm sure you've met a lot of experts there, and you've audited a lot of functions of HR in big companies, organizations.
Yeah.
Have you come across any experiences or any examples of some best practices that an HR has put in implementation for employees? Keeping that employees as customers. Yeah. Any best practice or a couple of examples if you'll be able to share with us?
I can give you two examples, two from two different processes. One process is the hiring process,
okay,
and the other is the employee performance management process.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
The hiring process, one of the problems that we always have is that the hiring is done by different people. So there are different recruiters, right? And we always find that no matter how much we try to do it, there is always inconsistency, right? Some
Right.
recruiters are able to capture, some recruiters are not able to capture certain traits, certain things to look for, right? So in some organizations that we work with, we've audited and all of that, right? The recruitment team has treated the recruitment process almost like an operations, right? So you have an input, you have a process, you have an output, and you have a feedback,
Perfect.
right? You also need to get calibration. So there is a formal calibration done when it comes to recruiters, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a
Mm-hmm.
like like in quality, right? And you have been in training and quality, Kalpesh. So you know that maybe every quarter, every month, people when they do quality audits, right? They would calibrate people. They would give them
Yes.
a situation, they will give them a case, and they will say, okay, on these parameters you evaluate,
Yeah.
and then you have a calibration report, and you will look at repeatability and reproducibility and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So we've seen in at least two companies that I've kind of worked with, consulted with. I thought that that's a great practice that they actually have quarterly or every 2 months, right? They have a calibration session, right, where there would be an actual a candidate interview which would be already recorded, right? And then there are, let's say I have 5 recruiters, they all have to evaluate it, and you run it like a calibration session. So at the end of it, there will be a deviation that gets calculated, and if a recruiter is more than 5% or 10% or whatever, I mean whatever is their threshold, then you take some corrective action. You train the recruiter to make sure that they are calibrated. I thought that was something that is good, and I'm actually surprised that it doesn't happen that often. You would
Wow. And
expect
that's,
is a common thing, isn't it? That you would
yeah.
expect to happen every time,
Right.
right? People are capturing data, right? You would expect that there should be some kind of a calibration. So that's one. The second thing that from a employee kind of a performance management perspective, right? And this is one thing that we had. Anup is here on the webinar as well. So we had a COPC webinar recently, and we had that conversation. Most of the times, what happens is that we have in our performance management, we have very strong actions on people who overperform and people who underperform. So if you look at the distribution, there will be like a 10% outliers on the positive side and a 10% outliers on the negative side. And all our R&R is kind of geared towards that, right? Reward and recognition and all of that. And so on the right hand side where people are doing very well, we have our rewards, recognitions, all of that. And when people who are at the left hand side, we have our PIPs and performance improvement plans and all of that. But the point is that the performance of the process is an average which gets driven by the middle order. What are we doing for the middle order, right? And in this case, right, and then, at least in one of my clients, what they do is that this middle order, right? You understand what you mean by middle order? Middle order are these people who have not met their targets, but they are very close, right? For those people, what would you do? So one of the things that you would do is maybe you call them out, you have them as a point of contact, you have them as a
Shrikant, we're not able to see you. Shrikant, Tim, I think there seems to be a small network glitch. Just give us a moment and we'll be back. So, team, we'll continue this discussion. I think Shreekant lost the connection, and he will be back. So, meanwhile, I think the current example or the discussion that we are having, and which was so beautifully expressed by Shreekant, on the empowerment and the ownership and empowerment for all the employees. Just a moment, team. Guys, sorry. So I was just talking to Shrikant. He's coming back. So from these two examples that Shrikant just mentioned, and where he was also talking about the calibration at the recruitment stage, and where we were just discussing about the performance management, focusing on the middle order. Have any one of you, all about 55 people who are here right now, what has been your experience? In your organization, what are the best practices that you have, considering your employees as your customers? And if you have any of those, may I request you to share that on the comments, and we will actually pick that up while we continue this discussion further. So would like to hear from you all, and to keep this ball rolling, and to keep talking about HR as a business partner, or HR, or role of HR as a business function. Okay, great. We're having Shrikant joining back. So teams, where we talk about even HR as a business function today. Yes, the whole there is a role which has emerged in the last 12-15 years, which HR business partner are the special skills that a person is assigned with, and he's aligned to the business operations together. If you have the practices and any common or best practices that you adopt in your organization, I'll actually request you to put that on the comment here, and it'll be great to share that with all the people who are attending this live webinar. Great, we have Shrikant back. Shrikant, are you able to hear us? Yeah, Shrikant, are you able to hear us? Okay, I think he's taking more. Shrikant, we can hear.
I was worried that this will happen, and as Dr. Murphy suggests, right? If you think that something will go wrong, it will. So yes, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Shrikant. And I think this is this was dedicated. Sorry, Shrikant.
Right. I was on my way for a moment so that it will, you might be able to hear me better.
Sure, Shrikant. Yeah. So Shrikant, I while we were waiting for you, I've actually asked all the audience question for that if they have any of the best practices in their units right now, and if they are doing something as HR business partners, or as an HR function, something for the employees, considering them as customers, to put that on comments, and we will actually pick that up during our discussion. Great. So Shrikant, I think we were talking about the performance management of doing something for people who are in the middle box.
Middle market, we call it, right? So in my post, I've written it at batting for the middle order. Right? We all know. I mean, I'm sure most of us Indians follow cricket quite a bit, so we know that in a test match, right? The way we win is by the middle order, right? If the middle order is strong, and if we are able to kind of get the averages up, then we have a better chances, right? So to a certain extent, right? And sometimes what happens is that this is not any one function's problem, right? Across functions, even within operations, what happens is that we get swayed by our stars, right? And therefore we reward them, and then we always try to work on the people who are really at the bottom, and we do their performance improvement plans and all of that, right? Why that is important, there is no doubt about it. The point is that people who are just about there, they have not yet achieved the target, but who are just about there, right? If you push them towards meeting their numbers, right, I think the overall performance, right, shoots up significantly. And I see very little actually when it comes to the industry, and again, don't get me wrong, this is not for any particular organization, but across the industry, we don't really see a lot of focus to be done for that middle 80%. Okay, all right. So that's one of the things. The third thing, and I think we had some conversations earlier about it, is that we all kind of understand, right? For any process, those of you who are engineers on the call, we all know, right? That unless you have a feedback loop, right, a control loop, there is never going to be any improvement. So the question is, as a function, do we get to see what happens after what we have done? So, for example, once I have hired people, I have given them to the function. What happens after that? Do we get to know, right? In terms of are they performing well? Are they sticking around? So one of the things that the COPC standard talks about is that if you want to really measure the quality of the recruitment process, one of the things that you might want to look at is your 90-day retention, right? And what that means is after the people have come in, they have gone through some of the training, they have started the work, right? Are they sticking around? Are they performing okay, right? Or they find that this is not my cup of tea and they have left. If that was the case, then ideally we shouldn't have got them in. Now, this is not only the problem at the HR functions point of view, isn't it? The problem could also be that the operations has given us the wrong hiring requirements. The point is, we will have to sit and agree on this, that what we have got so far. I got 100 people, and if 50 out of them have left within the first 90 days, 120 days, then I haven't even got the ROI out of those people who have joined in. Right, and therefore, one of the things that we would recommend for you to look at, and for those who are on the call, we would like you to look at is in terms of what are the metrics that we are currently tracking. And Kalpesh, I think you mentioned that somewhere in the this thing also, a lot of times we
I think we've lost your voice again, Shreekant. The team, while Shreekant comes back, and there seems to be a network issue at his place. I think what he mentioned is a very good metric to look at. That today a lot of us as HR functions, we keep looking at hiring people as per the requirement. We keep going back and giving what is required for the business units for them to function. But do we have any practices currently which are, which talks about the analysis, the post-hiring analysis, the pre-hiring analysis of how are these people functioning? One of the elements which I clearly remember, and this is what I've dealt with when I was working in the corporate world and now as a consultant as well. That a lot of programs, like high potential programs, are done for people who are in the top 10%. There is a PIP which is done for the people who are in the bottom 80% or bottom 10%. I'm sorry, and so there is focus on building strengths for people who are very strong. There is focus on improving people who are not very good, or either they move up the ladder or they move out of the entire frame. The question is, what do we do for people who are in this middle block? And I think a lot of our companies also have this practice about having a 9 blocker. So a lot of times we put our people into the 9 blocker basis on the skills and basis on the potential, and and even that 9 blocker sometimes helps, but the focus remains on the top 10% or the bottom 10%. What do we do for people who are in the central or middle part? Shrikant, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Kalpesh, I can. You might have a little bit of a background from my end because now I've gone into the balcony and I'm taking the call on my phone. But as long as you guys can hear me and see me, it should be okay. I'm sorry, guys, all of you. On behalf of Airtel, Jio, and everybody else who is providing me support, my apologies.
No, I get that, Shrikant. And Shrikant, I was just building to the point that you mentioned that, today a lot of companies have this culture of high pot. So high potential. Right. So where you take care of the top 10% and you give a lot of additional training and boosting them.
Yeah.
And you have a PIP for the bottom 10% because then you want to look at how do you take them out?
Correct.
What
Just kind of missed it. And if that happens on an ongoing basis, right? One is, of course, it affects their motivation. They see others getting it. They are almost there, but they don't get it. And to be very honest, right, the process average actually is driven by the middle group because there is a significant group there. So what do we do with those guys, right? And if we start thinking from that point of view, we might be able to generate a little bit of an R&R, or some kind of a process to kind of validate what they are doing. I think it goes a long way, right?
Right.
So for the clients that we worked with, normally you would have that as well. Okay.
Great. So, Shrikant, I don't want to miss on one very important question before we actually start picking up questions from the audience, and that is,
Sure.
still a lot of our HR functions have activity-based metrics
Correct.
versus an outcome-based metrics.
Right.
So, if I may request you to share some insights on how do we convert our activity-based metrics into outcome-based metrics for recruitment, for training, for performance management. How do we do that?
I would say we don't want to convert, right? We want to make sure that we have a balance in our scorecard. We may have some activity metrics anyway. Like, for example, I need to do a certain number of people that need to hire. I need to do a certain number of, one-on-ones. I need to do a certain number of focus group trainings. So focus group sessions, right? And those activities are important. We need to make sure that they are done. The problem that we see is that our scorecards are generally filled with only activity metrics. And there is a lot of focus on those as compared to outcome metrics. So one of the things that we talk about, right, if you look at recruitment as such, right, there is a recruitment on time and there is a recruitment quality. Right? Recruitment on time to a certain extent is an activity metric. I needed 100 people. Did you give me 100 people on time or not? But then the outcome would be what is the quality that I got, right? So did these people perform? Did they complete their training? Did they go on the floor and did they complete 90 days like we talked about, right? That kind of becomes an outcome metric. So the more as a function, the more we start taking ownership of some of the outcomes, right? The more relevance this function has within the organization. Right? If we only keep doing, activities, and if our scorecards, our individual scorecards, your scorecards only have activities, then what happens is that after a certain point of time, and especially in this difficult times, right, where everybody is reevaluating the cost that they have to put in for every little thing, unless we are able to show that this is the outcome that I'm bringing to the table, it becomes very difficult, right, for us to get to get supposed to do focus group sessions. Now, that's fine. I will continue to track that. Okay, I did, whatever, 20 focus group sessions. My team this month and the last quarter did 20 focus group sessions. But then what is the outcome? What did I get? Did I get a better retention? Did I get better performance? Did I get better, reduction in absenteeism? Whatever that is that you are looking for as part of that engagement, right? If we are able to start tracking that, I think your personal scorecards will start becoming more relevant and more business oriented. This is a much larger topic, right, Kalpesh? You understand that, and we also consult organizations. So I don't want to, I don't want to, give you a silver bullet, right? And nobody has a silver bullet, really, right? But if we kind of start reorienting ourselves, right? Go back to your own performance scorecard and be really honest. Look at your own goal sheet. And if we can, kind of identify, if I have 10 goals for this year, how many of these goals are really outcome and how many of them are activities, right? Even if we are able to do that, right, I think it will take us to the next level of, influence on the business. And if we find that, okay, out of the 10, right, 8 are activities, 2 are outcomes, can I add a couple of more outcomes? Right?
Right.
That is something that we would probably like the people on the call to kind of think about.
Wonderful. Great, Shrikant. I think that was the recruitment on time versus recruitment quality was a beautiful example to focus on. We have a question,
Right.
Shrikant, and for the next 10-15 minutes, I would want to pick up questions from the audience.
Sure.
So here is a question from Vikram where he's talking about that how do we measure employee experience and what is the executive traction on that?
Vikram, thank you. The way you asked is how is Shreekant measuring employee experience? I don't measure employee experience. I have only 3 employees in my company, but we do.
Right. So
To be very
that's where
honest,
I'll.
there are
Yeah.
no even
No,
for a
sorry, go.
small. For even for a small team, it makes sense for us to do that. So we measure employee experience by a couple of things, which is very similar to what most of the people would be doing. One is through a formal survey, right? So you would have, and no matter how small the team is, and no matter if we think, even if I send a formal survey anyway, everybody will say good things about it, right? Even if we feel that way, it is always a good idea to have a formal survey. COPC normally recommends that you do at least once in a year, but of course, depending on your organization, you might want to do it often. So maybe once in 6 months or whatever is one thing. The second thing would typically be more in terms of doing focus groups, right? And I normally don't do skip levels, but we would normally have focus groups where we have groups of people sitting, attending, and talking to you about it. And in the lockdown times, in the times when there is remote working, we have found that doing this is even more critical, and doing this more often is what is required. If earlier your plan was to do once in a quarter, you might want to change that to maybe once in 2 months. If you are doing it monthly, you might want to do it fortnightly. Because for various reasons, when it comes to remote working, the way you will manage employee experience, right, is quite different in that. To continue with, Vikram, your question, executive traction, I'm assuming what you mean is by the leadership. One of the things that people normally do is do town halls and do brown bag sessions and things like that, and those are all good practices that we've seen in the industry, where you try to get a bunch of random employees and have conversations with them. One of the advantage being now is executives as leaders, you can do more often than what you could have done earlier, right? You don't have to travel to the sites. You can do it face to face, and people are getting more comfortable doing this face to face. Right today, I'm comfortable. I mean, apart from the technology issues, right? We are comfortable having this conversation over a virtual platform, and I think that is something that people have started to find, right? So those are the things that I would probably recommend.
Yeah, and Shrikant, I would just like to add to what you said about the feedback form or the survey that gets created. I would just like to add one element which I've seen is that what context are you taking that feedback from? So if the context is that you want to showcase that to the stakeholders and showcase that yes, everything is fine and we have a good percentage, I have seen companies even manipulating the kind of questions they put in because the score should always look at 80% and above.
Yeah. Yeah.
And versus the second part is the context of actually knowing and understanding of what the pain points are. And I think that also makes a significant difference in how do you get the honesty out of the whole process.
Well, look, I mean, to be very candid with you, it is about, and this is true for all functions. It's not just HR, right? I mean, in everywhere we see people trying to play around with data so that it looks good, right? I mean, I have this, I like to say that, in the industry, we have a green filter, right? So unless the number is green, we don't even see it, right? So we want to do everything, right, by which you start seeing the number to be green, and that is where things start falling apart, right? The question is whether is the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog, right? You want to make sure that what we are doing is actually giving us the right picture. If it is not, then maybe it's time for us to work on. Management by objectives is a great thing, right? And typically we should probably thank the Western philosophies to kind of drive management by objectives. But one of the drawbacks of management by objectives, and a lot of you might have been seeing that, and things, and people like Edward Deming talk about it, right? What is the problem with management by objective is that the objective then becomes the only thing, right? It is just numbers then. And we all know that it's not just, if it is numbers, then it's nothing. It has to be numbers plus more.
Yes.
right? So once we start getting into that, right, it becomes a bit difficult, right? But I hope, Vikram, that has kind of answered your question, right? So we do have ESAT surveys, and we conduct them, and we try to follow some of the the standard questions. There are about 12 questions, right, in Gallup survey. So we try to modify some of those and use them for our own purposes. And all of our clients use some way or the other of those and some version of that.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I think, Shrikant, as you rightly said, that some amount of data and some amount of intelligence, rather, I'll also say some amount of cross connection of those data points. So you have an ESAT which comes in, compare
Yeah,
that with your retention or attrition policy,
correct.
compare that to your performance management, and then you actually see the graph whether all those three data points are talking to each other or not. Which
We
is,
have, so at COPC we have a couple of training programs. One is on in terms of looking at data and that, and then we
yeah,
also have an HR specific training, right? Which is, I think, about now 3 days, 3 half days, or something like that. One of the things that we talk in that is that we need to also, whenever we are taking a decision, we need to look at the trend, right? Not
yeah,
just one
yeah,
time. So if
yes,
you are looking at ESAT surveys, and if you are telling me that 2019 is so and so, my immediate next question would be, what was 2018? What was 2017? Right? And
yeah,
has
yes,
that actually shown an improvement? Has that shown a reduction? And then, to Kalpesh, your point, now if we find that this is something that is a problem, what have we done and has it helped? Right? One of
yes,
the common problems that we will see is that year on year there are some common areas, right, where you will find that the feedback is there, like for example career progression, right? If that is an area, then what have we done, and has it actually resulted? Going back to our earlier discussion, are there any outcome metrics which say that it has actually worked?
yes,
Right? So
perfect,
that would be one of the areas to look at. But shall we go
perfect.
to another question?
Yes. So we have about 4 minutes left, but Shrikant, I want to pick up this question is, uh, how do we move as HR from an enabling function to being a strategic partner or being a trusted partner for the business? And
So
especially, I would just want to also add to the question is a lot of people in our question
mm,
in when we received have also asked that one is how we do that. Second, how we do that in traditional promoter-owned businesses.
mm. So for
So
smaller
these are
organizations,
for smaller
all of that, right?
organizations.
Well,
Yes.
I will go back to my earlier point. What we talked about is where we are, where we want to be, and how do we get there, right? That those are the three things we would like to look for. And where we are is traditionally, so HR as a function we have to move and change the way we look at it. Is that it's no longer enabler function, right? It is a core function. It has a direct impact on the businesses. So even if it is a small medium business with promoters, in fact there your resources are limited, right? In that case, right, whatever you do, right, you don't really have a play to experiment, try out, do things, right? So it becomes even more important for you to justify that these are the outcomes that I'm bringing to the table, right? So to a certain extent, having an outcome based thinking, having an outside in thinking, and wherever possible, if we can quantify it in rupee terms, dollar terms, right, is something that I have seen immensely helpful, right? And I know that this may not be possible all the time, but a lot of times in the industry, when we go and we ask what is the problem, right? One problem, of course, is not getting the right people when we need them. So hiring on time and all of that, right? But the other one is when we get the people, they don't stick around and there is a lot of attrition. The question is this attrition getting converted into a dollar value? Do we know what is the cost of my attrition? If we keep saying that, oh, we have attrition and we have a problem with attrition, we've not even started to look at the impact of that. But can we convert that into saying, okay, so one person leaving me, if I pay somebody 15,000 rupees a month to replace that person, it costs me 45,000 or 50,000 rupees, right?
Yes.
And generally, in our experience, the cost of replacement is about 3 to 4 times a person's monthly salary. It could even be more. I mean, I'm not even considering the impact on quality and customer satisfaction and all of that, right? So if we are able to quantify, and what are the costs? So there might be some direct costs, there might be some indirect cost. Have we quantified it? If we have not quantified it, then it is very difficult. Even for a small, especially for a small and medium business, it becomes even more important, right? Because I have 10 people in my team. If 2 people leave, it is a significant impact to my business.
Yeah.
Unless we do that, right? And I'm hoping that this kind of addresses the last question that I'm seeing in the question: why people from HR background don't make it to CEO level. It's a very general question. I'm sorry, I cannot comment on it, publicly. But the typical reason is that we are not able to demonstrate the value that we are bringing to the table, right? The more we are able to do that as HR professionals, if we are able to bring in the, what does an organization want, right? For any organization, what is the goal? We want our service to go up, our quality to go up, right? Our revenues to go up, our costs to come down. If we are able to somehow demonstrate that as an HR professional, I am able to help you achieve those business goals, then we have a seat at the table. Right, like they say, right? You need to have. You understand what I mean by seat at the table, right? So we have a say in business decisions.
Which is absolutely right, and I think Sanjeev also mentioned that in the other words is that today as an HR professional, I just need to be honest and ask myself that how much of business acumen do I have for the industry that I'm working on, for the
Correct.
goals that my organization has, and to understand of what direction is my business moving, and not limit myself to knowing what am I expected to do.
What we are doing, right? One of the things that I think earlier some of you and Vikram and some of us have written is do we have time? We still have time, right?
Yeah, we'll take a couple of more minutes. Yes, Shrikant.
Couple of more. So one of the things that we've seen is having some kind of an early warning indicators, right? So now the data analytics has become more and more possible with us. We have a lot of. I'm not even talking about big data. I'm talking about small data. Right? Small data means data that we have within our organization. Right? Does that help us identify if there are any early warning indicators in terms of our employee behaviors? Right? Simple things like attendance, absenteeism, right? Late logins, right? Those kind of things, right? In a contact center, generally we would find that those are indicators of people's motivation levels, right? Their performance in itself, right, to a certain extent, is feedback. So do we look at that? Right? And a lot of times, although this is known, we all know that this needs to be done, we find precious little being done when it comes to analytics. Right? We have a lot of this data available. If I have 1,000 employees, right? Imagine the amount of data that I'm generating every single day. Right? They're coming in, they're logging in, they're going out, their performance. The question is, as a business, what am I doing? Am I understanding patterns? Am I finding if there are certain areas, like are there certain teams which seem to be disconnected, right? And therefore, I need to take some actions around that, right? That's one area that we find being a bit, loose, and we might encourage people on the call to start looking at that as well.
Wonderful. Hey, great, Shrikant. And
Hello?
yeah, Shrikant, are you able to hear me? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was saying, Shrikant, I think a lot of new perspectives and a new approach opened up in this discussion with you, and a lot of insights, I'm sure, for the audience, the kind of engagement that they had on the questions that on behalf of Core HRIR and Candid on Connect Quotient. And I'm going to I've taken the liberty, Shrikant, to ask the audience, and we'll probably request you to get them answered for us, at your convenient time.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Shrikant, I'm sorry, we seem to have lost you again.
Sure. Are you able to hear me now?
Shreekant, I'm sorry we lost your voice, Shreekant.
Hi, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, Shreekant, if you can pause your video, maybe we'll be able to hear you better. No, I think Shreekant, we're losing your voice. So, team, meanwhile, while Shrikant gets back, thank you very much once again on behalf of Core HRIR and Connect Quotient for participating in this candid conversation, staying with us, and giving us so much of inputs and comments and engaging.
Oh, okay.
Would love to keep getting
Is this
a lot
better
of
now?
insight. Yes, Shrikant, this is wonderful. We can hear you. Shrikant, I think we lost you again. So, on behalf of Core HRIR, again, as I said, thank you to the audience. Thank you to Shrikant and
Okay.
COPC.
Are you able to hear me
Shrikant,
now?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So I was thanking you, Shrikant, for your time and for the kind of contribution you've given us and insights. Thank you for taking this time, and I will reach out to you for questions that we receive from the audience, and get those responded from your side. I think Shrikant, we are losing you again. Team, I think we'll park the conversation here, but we will keep looking at more and more interactions like these. And for any comments or any suggestions that you have, even for candid conversation and what kind of speakers or what kind of topics you would want us to address, please feel free reach out to us, and we will try and get more sessions like these and more insightful conversations from leaders. Shrikant, are you back? Shrikant, we can see you. Hello. Okay. Shrikant, we would have loved to hear some closing comments from your side. Shrikant? Okay. Hey, I'm so sorry, team, for the network, and the inconvenience caused. I think Shrikant has got dropped, but thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and let's keep this learning elements and candid conversations on. Looking forward for great engagement from all of you. Thank you on behalf of Core HRIR and Connect Quotient for being there. Thank you, guys. Bye.